happens at the ending first before going back to chapter 1, or watching the last 10 minutes of a movie before jumping back to the opening scene. But here we are, the day of the Church New Year, Advent Sunday, and we're told the end of the story up front, the end of all things. And the sceptical part of me thinks that there is not a single year that has gone by when at least a few preachers have sounded the alarm about the day of the Lord, the end, being whatever year, whatever particular year it happens to be at that time. Every single year. And to be fair, every mainstream church has annual reminders that the end is a thing. On the one hand, I suppose it's helpful to remember that this isn't all there is. This isn't all there is. On the other hand, there is a danger of being paralysed by worry about whatever is going on and where it's all heading, and whether this is individually or collectively our last year. But I really don't think Jesus wants us to be paralysed by fear.
That's too loud.
It's too loud. Sorry, mate. Jesus does tell us to watch for the end. He does tell us to watch for the end. And Isaiah...
Daddy, we fight. So Jesus does tell us to watch for the end. And Isaiah gives us a vision of what that end looks like. Just everything streaming towards God. Judgment enacted and peace. Blessed peace at last. So let's look closer at Jesus' words to the disciples. And first off, isn't it interesting that Jesus compares God to a thief in the night? That's who God is in that metaphor, a thief in the night. It's quite interesting. I think in devotion since, it is one of the less explored and less popular metaphors for God. It doesn't really make for a nice stained glass window. But let's imagine you're the owner of a house. What would happen to you if you did stay awake and alert every single night, terrified of a thief breaking in? What would happen to you? Now, I have to say it may be that this image will strike differently if someone lives in a place where break-ins are far more common or house architecture is less secure than we have here for the most part. And it may strike someone differently if they've suffered the terrible violation of a house break-in. But even then, if you stay awake every night fretting about thieves breaking in, you will go insane through sleep deprivation alone. You will go insane. Outside of parenting young kids, sleep deprivation is a form of torture. It's hugely harmful. So what is Jesus meaning? Because I really don't think he means we should be living on the edge of adrenaline all the time. And I think it could be as simple as be sensible and alert, but just get on with things. Just live your lives. Live your lives. Jesus describes men in the field, women grinding meal, just normal activities for the time. People living life. Jesus tells an interesting approach to the Noah story in that usually the focus is on the righteousness of Noah. But here we have people eating and drinking, marrying and so on, just normal life. None of them saw what was to come, whether they were unrighteous, if we take the Noah example, or just rather normal, like in the other. The end, comes for them all. Judgment happens regardless, but life has to carry on. But what we do in that life is important. God comes like a thief in the night, and we can't do anything about that. But God also comes to us in other ways. So if you were to turn forward to the next chapter in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus tells a parable that includes this. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. So before God comes as a thief in the night, I guess we're more likely and more often to meet God in, for example, the face of a person experiencing homelessness on the streets of Perth. So we've got a choice before us, a bit like the prophet Isaiah puts the choice before the people, that invitation, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. We have a choice. Our work is important. The quality of our work is important. Even though the greatest hope, the final peace, the reconciliation of all things comes from beyond our work as a gift from God through Jesus Christ. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. That invitation. You know, even though humans can be very corrupt and wicked, I hope that there is always time for someone to respond to the light of Christ. Come walk in that light. That light has immense transformative power. And on the note of transformation, I've got a slight segue, a very clumsy transition, but a final plug for the Advent group this year. So in the introduction to the Advent book, which we'll use this year, there is a quote by a man named Gus Speth, an environmental lawyer who, amongst other roles, was once the Dean of the Yale University School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. And thus says Gus. Try saying that 10 times quickly. Thus said Gus. I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. A spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. So you could change the word there, transformation, to conversion, and you're speaking more explicitly Christian. If you need conversion from selfishness, greed, apathy, or are sick of war, of hunger, cycles of revenge, tribal and national violence, come to the Lord, and you will at least find some peace in knowing that you can give your best efforts. Your work does matter. But God will ultimately work it all out for the better. You can engage in deep conversion, helping to change weapons of war to tools of sustaining life, energy spent on conflict channeled to harmony and tending growth. You can do all that. And I suppose that at the end of the day, at the end of all days, I know at least in principle, which is better in the here and now, and is God-honouring and pleasing to God. I want to try and finish each sermon in Advent this year on a really positive, hopeful note with some
encouragement for you all about some genuinely good news to build us up as we walk in the light of Christ. So first bit of good news. On the environment, I want to just recommend a documentary to watch that I did when I was sick with COVID. Documentary is called 2040 or 2040. It came out in 2019. And it's just by an Aussie dad who was a bit disturbed by what's going on in the natural world and has a daughter who is then 4 years old. And he was concerned for what the world would be like for her. So he went out to find good news about restorative and regenerative practices and technologies that already exist now. They already exist now that can help reduce the impact of a changing climate and what it might look like in 2040 if those things were implemented in a widespread way. And as the dad of a 4-year-old, myself, and a 2-year-old, I found it really encouraging. And I hope you will too. And another bit of good news. This week, there was news about WA moving in the direction of what's called Housing First, in a big step towards helping people sleeping rough on the streets of our city, helping them get into safe homes and supported with wraparound services to change their lives. Part of that is 100 permanent new homes for rough sleepers in the very near future, and also 18 new transitional homes provided through our Anglican agency St Bart's, who have expertise in crisis accommodation. That's 118 new homes for people doing it very tough. So I found that really encouraging, and I hope you do too, and you can support that work. So come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Let those steps be in action reflective of the kingdom of heaven, and in spirit attuned to the hope that seeks its fulfillment in God. Lord, make us one as we walk with Christ today and forever.